Hi, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about tooth trauma. And I want to help share with you or provide some insight as to what you should do if you have tooth trauma or if you have a family member or a friend who has tooth trauma. And so it's like, what are the steps? What should we do first? What does it matter that we get in touch with a dentist? Can it wait? Can we manage it ourselves? What are some things that we should look for to help reassure that it's going to be okay and we don't need to try to get in to see a dentist right away? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So I want to share with you kind of the different steps or process or thought process I would take you through if I was on the call with you or if you came into the clinic even. And oftentimes tooth trauma is not something that will be dealt with on the day it happens. It's rare, of course, probably like anything, in 20% of the cases it needs to be dealt with right away. But a lot of times the rest of the mouth, the lips, and other things are still very swollen and the patient's very upset, especially if they're young, and they're unable to really get them to be calm. And honestly, the treatment can wait. So I want to share with you what are those situations in which it can wait, what you should look for, and what is going to be that crucial, like, no, we need to see someone right away. So let's get started with that. So there's three types of levels of trauma. If someone gets hit in the face, it could be a ball, it could fall, anything can happen. But generally, what I see is I'm going to categorize it three ways. The first is the tooth just gets broken. Now, it can get broken pretty far up by the gum line, and that's probably going to be quite painful and not be able to be managed with just some Advil. So if it's halfway or more of the tooth, it can be very sensitive, and maybe the patient or you want to get the patient to someone right away because it's very uncomfortable and hard to manage with Advil. But ibuprofen would be the thing I would recommend there. Secondly, the tooth doesn't get broken, or it does get broken and it just gets moved. It can get moved sideways, front to back, or up and down. It can get pushed into the alveolus, like into the bone. It can get dropped down. The third way is that the tooth is completely what we call avulsed. So the tooth goes flying and the person comes, and if you're lucky, you find it, and you have this tooth now in your hand, but you just don't know what to do with it, and it's covered in everything, and you still haven't reached a dentist. So those are the three types of levels. The first level, if the tooth's just broken, you want to evaluate it for other things in the area. Maybe the gums are swollen, the lips are swollen. If it's not very painful, there's no point in rushing because it can be quite tender still. So it's not a true emergency. A tooth can be repaired at any time. If the tooth starts to turn dark, again, likely it was going to happen anyway. The tooth may need a root canal. If you have the piece, don't bother. The piece is not going to be re-glued. There's no benefit, only that we may use it in determining the shape of the original tooth. But usually we can look at the adjacent tooth for that. And like I said, that may not be a major problem as far as emergency. The only main time I would call the dentist and try to get in sooner than later is if it was very painful and not managed by ibuprofen. The second is if the tooth is moved. So it could be moved laterally, front to back, up and down. This can be, of course, a much bigger problem, and it may also have a fracture along with it. But if the tooth is really moved, but it could be very loose, at this point kind of it gets pulled out of the socket a little bit, and now it's very loose. Trying to push it back to where it once was is helpful, okay? So if you can grin and bear through it, that is a good way to do it. It's sometimes done best by the teeth biting together or the teeth biting to get it there, because the force of your thumb's kind of squishy, it doesn't really move it. So you may have a harder time getting it back in. You may have to bite on something to push it back in, and again, all depending on the patient's state of mind and what they feel comfortable with doing. That's going to be faster than if you get to a dentist and the dentist does it. A lot of swelling and other things are going to kind of happen that by the time you get to the dentist, it's much harder for the dentist to do it. However, we will do this if need be. The key time it's important to really make sure that you get to see a dentist sooner than later is not so much really, that the tooth is moved, but can you get your back teeth together?
what does the bite feel like? Is this tooth moved in such a way that now you can't bite on your back teeth, so you can't chew? So really the most important time is that the teeth, if the teeth in the back are not coming together, not able to close. So getting your jaw to be able to close is super important, and this is where I really would try to get it back in yourself, or try to get to a dentist so it can be pushed in. Often a tooth that has been pushed back into place will not necessarily be okay in the sense that it'll not need any other treatment. It may need a root canal, but it has a much better likelihood of surviving if you can do that, and do it again very soon after the traumas happen. The third way is, of course, the tooth goes flying and we have found the tooth, and this actually has happened, of course, to any dentist who's been doing dentistry long enough. We've had patients come in with a tooth in their hand, or maybe they don't have the tooth, but let's say you have the tooth. A lot of times people will say, what should I do with the tooth? Should I put it in something? So putting it in something like saline, milk has always been cited. There's not a lot of science and real truth behind how well that's going to help the tooth hold up long term. But what it does do is it gives the person who's lost the tooth a little bit of comfort knowing that the tooth might be able to go back in, and it really just helps keep everybody calm. So putting it in something, if it's been out of solution or lost out of the mouth for more than 60 minutes, it's very unlikely. 15 minutes is about all you really have with the tooth to be out of the mouth. So trying to get it back in or keeping it in a solution, and if you're lucky, your next door neighbor is a dentist, and that can be done all very quickly. But the truth of the matter is, once a tooth's really been avulsed or lost from the mouth altogether, the rate of recovery or long-term survival of the tooth is going to be very poor. And although we will always put it back in and kind of glue it to the adjacent teeth for a little while, it buys us some time. So at the very least, it's great to save that tooth, because it will buy us some time, buy you some time, and helps us reconstruct where the tooth was and what the tooth looked like, so that when we do make a new tooth, could be with a dental implant or could be with a bridge, then we're going to have a good idea of what that tooth looked like. So always save the tooth, but really think about if it's really been gone, it can't find it. It's just the same as having an extraction. I mean, getting the dentist to check everything else around the area is important, and very seldom will we break the actual jaw in any kind of trauma. But if the tooth is completely removed, then we're not going to have to really have a good prognosis for that tooth, even if we get to see a dentist very quickly. So I hope this was helpful. It's always something that we don't expect to happen to us, but it does typically happen. Oh, and on that note, one last thing, if it is a baby tooth, then don't even worry at all. There is nothing that anyone would bother doing if it's a primary tooth. So we will only really be concerned with permanent teeth. And the other common question I think I get is, if a baby tooth is traumatized or pushed up into the gum or lost, will it impact the final, like the permanent tooth, the next tooth? Very, very unlikely. That permanent tooth that's still up in the bone is very well protected in a little sac called a follicle, and it will really not get much damage, even if the baby tooth is driven up into the gum or the face is hit in any way. We rarely ever see any real trauma or long-term damage to permanent teeth when they're in that state. So that's it. I hope that was very helpful, and I would love it if you could leave a comment, or you have any questions, then reach out and we'll see you next time.